writing a model. Okay, you're having these very nice differential equations. If you cannot put that in a short paragraph to explain what you're doing, then you haven't really understood. Huh? In the same way, if you are talking about something you're going to do and you cannot quantify it mathematically, then you have not really understood it. So it goes both ways. In other words, you should be able to tell a grade 3 student what you are doing, and they should be able to understand, oh, is that what you're doing? All right. Okay. So one thing we need to understand is that when you're writing your thesis, you'll not be always writing your thesis quotation marks. Writing either in active or passive, and you put brackets for references, right? Right. So when you are doing that, it means that you are writing in your own words what someone else did. And it's very important that you do not reproduce their words as they wrote them. You should not reproduce their words as they wrote them. So you read the paper, then you summarize it in your own words, and then you write in your own style, in your own words. When I read a paper, whether it's a publication or I read someone's thesis, I can already tell where someone has copied if I've known that paper before. Just flashes in your mind, bang, okay, let me check this. And when you check it, you find exactly they've lifted it as it is word for word and put it in there. I was marking a PhD thesis from Northwest University in May last month, 2 months ago. And there was that problem that this person had just lifted something from someone, put it in their thesis. You've done so much work over so many years and you fail because you've plagiarized some work. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So the person now has to rewrite their thesis, begin afresh, just because they are too lazy to summarize 3-4 paragraphs lifted from somewhere else. So we need to understand the import and the importance of being able to summarize something and write it in our own way. Okay. All right. So when you're reading something, a summary will be brief and you only focus on those aspects that are important to your work. So if you're reading someone else's work, you just pick the issues that speak to what you're doing and summarize them in your words. And if you do it that way, in actual fact, when I was doing my PhD, I had a book like that where I would summarize papers. And sometimes I would have some cards. We used to have cards because we used to use these mainframe computers. So I would have some cards where I would write references and so forth. So I would summarize in my own words what I've written, what I've read from a paper. So I would have several of those books with several topics, for example, isotopes, odds, and stuff like that. And when I'm writing my thesis, I use my summarized notes. I just put the quotation marks. Then I'm not in danger of infringing on plagiarism. If you want to comment or ask, please feel free. Okay. So if you're reading something and it's not clear to you, it really, you don't lose anything by asking. You can ask and say, I don't understand this. No, you can ask, I don't understand it. You know, like, how many of you drive cars? 1, 2, 3. How many of you take your cars to the garage for service? Okay, so when you take to your garage for service, don't think that the people who service your cars, they know everything about your car. In actual fact, what happens is that, I think it was like maybe 6-7 years ago, I took my car for service to Indongo Toyota. Okay, and I said, when is the car coming out? They said, maybe this afternoon. And that afternoon, the car never came out. So I said, what's happening? Tomorrow we'll finish it. Tomorrow we'll finish it. And then following day I came, and They sent me to the manager. The manager said, look, we are sorry. We'll give you a car for a while. The guy who knows how to fix this, he has got an emergency. He's not around. He's the only one who can do this problem on your car. So when he comes, he will fix it. So they gave me a car to use while they were waiting for that guy to come and fix that part. It was something to do about on something that connects the electronics of the seat belts to the dashboards and all that kind of thing. So he was the only guy who could do it, and he had gone to the north. And so that tells you that in every industry it's the same. Even in academia, I don't know everything. When I don't know, I ask someone who knows something better than I do. So if you don't understand something, don't be afraid to ask. And that's how we learn. And the other thing we do is that when we read, we should also be questioning what we are reading. So normally I tell my undergraduate, I said, not everything in a textbook is correct. Not everything in a textbook is correct. There are some things which are out of date. There's new knowledge has come. And so whenever you are reading something, ask yourself some questions, okay? And see if you can clear those questions as you are reading something. So failing to have a solid understanding of your sources potentially make every one of your observations incorrect. Okay? So you need to understand what you are going through. Okay. So in the process of grasping our material, we need to interrogate whatever we are doing. Okay. It's like when you investigator and you find someone who is not cooperative. Yeah? They don't want to give you the information. So you have to find ways and tricks of going behind and ask them other questions that might shed light on what you're doing. So writing a PhD, researching for a PhD is something like that. Okay. So once you have that understanding, then you can begin to write and able to summarize the important information on your subject. If you can't concisely summarize a paper, okay, it may be an indication that you have not really understood it very well. So sometimes you have to read the paper once, twice, thrice. So when we deal with scientific writing, I'll show you how we actually can quickly read a paper, especially if you are writing some papers like Nature. They want you to write 1 page. That's 1 page. You put all the information in 1 page. And there's other journals like Geology, for example. You have 4 pages. All the information you have to write in 4 pages. And then there's another journal like Science. You know, the Science gives you up to 70 pages. You can write a lot. Huh? So, like when we did some work, a paper in biology, it's only 4 pages. Then we took that work, wrote some aspects that we could fit in that form in another journal, Science. So when we said everything about that subject. Now imagine you've got a paper which is 56 pages long, and you have to read it and summarize it. How are you going to do? It's like you are reading an honors thesis, 56 pages. So you can read the abstract, you read the conclusion, and then you go through the introduction to get the context. And then you look at all the figures and tables and graphs. And then you read the first line of every paragraph. After you've done that, if they are good writers, you've pretty read that paper. And if it's 56 pages, you can do it in less than an hour. You've read the paper, which is 56 pages long. But it takes some skill because some people are not good writers. So when you write the first paragraph in a paper, the first line of the paragraph, it should have, it acts like a small abstract of what that paragraph is going to be. And incidentally, you should always be able to answer questions concerning your work, whether or not where you are now. I can tell you for sure that those of you who are starting your PhD this time, right now, maybe you are not really clear. When I did my PhD in 3 years, the first year of my PhD, I didn't really know where I was going. I knew I had this topic, and I really did not know where I was going, how I was going to do it. And I had this supervisor who would just come and tell me, okay, so when is our next paper? so in my second year of my PhD, the first few months of my PhD, my second year, I wrote a paper. And my supervisor said, okay, we've done the first paper. Now, when is the second paper? He never used to like call me and say, okay, how are you doing? No, he just said, when is our second paper? So until I was about 1.5 years into my PhD, then I started seeing the lights. Okay, now I know where I'm going. But the first year, honestly telling you, I didn't know how this was going to end up. Yeah. Okay. So each time you are writing something, the last 3 months, I had 3 PhD theses to read, one from UJ, one from WITS, and one from Northwest. So the ones from UJ and WITS, there was one student, that one was from UJ, I think, yes, one student, he would write his conclusions before he wrote, before he wrote the evidence, like this is like this, like this, like this, like this, and then, but where is the evidence? Why are you saying it's like this? Okay, so when you are writing even a paper, you should support everything with evidence. Okay, you present your evidence first, and then you can give your conclusion that okay, because of this and this and this, then it's like this. Okay, so you should expect that your audience will end up of very attentive and careful readers. Yeah, they people who may mark your thesis, who may be interested to see your results, to see how are these results. But there'll be others who'll be interested to see whether you left the comma or whether you put an apostrophe instead of a semicolon. There'll be others who'll be interested to see whether did you use the and, did you use however or whereof, which one is best. No, there will be others who interrogate everything. So you should write as if your audience is very attentive and careful. Okay? It may not always be the case, but you should always have that assumption that the person who reads this may be picky. He may be picky. Okay? So with that condition, you want to make sure that you provide evidence for all your assertions. Provide evidence for what? In terms of figures, data, and this is very important that when you have your data, we'll look at it again when you look at writing your thesis. You need to present your data not just in text, but try and present your data in graphs, pie charts. Don't use tables so much. You can put tables in your. You can use tables in your appendix, but take the information from the table and summarize it so that it makes an impact. I mean, if you have a table with 36 columns, 36 rows, with numbers and figures, and so let's say suppose like you're having your chemical data for boreholes in Windhoek. You've got calcium, you've chloride, you've sulfate, you list them all. Okay, the data for the boreholes is given table 1. The reader is not interested. He knows that you can get that information. He's interested in how you can process that information. How do you process it? Okay. So even if you state an opinion, you want to present an informed opinion to say, okay, because the chloride is so much and the sulfate is so much, this may impact, may have an impact on the bicarbonate. And you present it in charts and graphs, something like that. And then it's also very important, then once you presented your data, you also look at what others have done somewhere else. You say, okay, in California, which is a dry place like Namibia, or in Nevada, they also did this and they got similar things like this, although ours are maybe higher. So once you present your data and then you present other information, other evidence from elsewhere, then you say, oh, okay, so this is a valid point. Happens everywhere in everywhere. And when we're looking at scientific journals, so those are the most credible sources of scientific literature. So what we are saying here is that you should not quote from Wikipedia. You're not allowed to quote from Wikipedia. Thesis, you need to quote from scientific journals, and you can also quote from another thesis which has been passed because it has been reviewed. So when we say something is peer reviewed, it means that that work was submitted and has undergone rigorous analysis. Okay? When you send a manuscript to a journal, the chances of it being rejected are higher than the chances of it being accepted. For example, the journal I sit on now, we receive about maybe 1,000 manuscripts, 1,200 a year. We only publish about 315 a year. That shows that when you are writing for a journal, one of the most interesting things is to say, how will the impact factor affect this publication? So the title you write, the title that is you write a very, 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 very long title. Chances that will not be cited that often. So the title and of course the content. So let's just give you some. Depending on your work, you may also use a textbook or lecture notes to support your statements. Okay, you may also use data collected from other sources and support it with your own data. And then national statistics agencies are respected organizations, different countries. Nation census data are organizations that have got what people would say a scientific input in them, like FDA, CDC, so forth. In social sciences, this is not the case, because in social sciences, you can even quote a newspaper article. Accepted. In social sciences, you can quote a newspaper article. But in science, that will not be taken as a credible source of information. And be careful what you get from the internet. Try and interrogate it to say, how correct is this? This is where we talk about open source information. Okay, so open source information is that information which may not have been interrogated or peer reviewed. So when you get that information, now it's your job to see how truthful is this information. You have to interrogate it. Say that, okay, this is for example, you cannot quote from Wikipedia, because anyone can edit and add stuff from Wikipedia. And then there are other open source journals. Not every open source journal is a good journal. Okay? There are other open source journals which are not accepted. Okay? So these open source journals, commonly, they are the type where you pay a fee to get your article published. Okay? Yeah. So not every open source journal is a credible source of information, because some of them never go through peer review. And what is happening now, especially with the issue of COVID, I don't know how many of you have been following the publication landscape. COVID brought something which is very, very interesting. What COVID did is that some journals were being paid money to accept certain type of material that are pro-vaccine, for example, and not to accept material which is not pro-vaccine. So what happened during COVID was that we got some interesting articles, especially in very, very, what can I say, prominent journals in medicine, like the Lancet, British Medical Journal, New England Journal of Medicine, that people started saying that this article has been published in this journal. One article actually was retracted, that was in the Lancet. It was published, and then other people put it and said, this article is completely wrong. And they actually went over it to try and see and state how it was wrong. So what emerged after this COVID era was what are known as preprint open publications. So this is where something is published on the internet by an author, okay, without having been viewed, but it brings in some of the interesting information, because if it had been put in a review, in a reviewer-oriented journal, it would have been rejected. Okay? So a good example was how ivermectin actually is a good cure for COVID. Okay? So the Japanese, South Koreans, and a few, there was one article which was published in the British Medical Journal, but towards the end, you know, so that tells you how, even if we are talking about peer-reviewed journals, there could be other factors that can affect true information. This is just to open your eyes. I don't want I don't want you to go out of here thinking that Papa said every peer-reviewed journal is a very good journal. But this just shows you that information is one of those commodities which are very expensive, both morally, they involve integrity, and they can be affected by bribery. Okay, that's information. It's very expensive commodity, especially when you look at the moral point of view. Even the BBC learned how to tell lies during the COVID era, you know? Okay, let's continue. I hope you, yes.
Look, I have a question based on writing papers. For example, the introduction section, when you have a true story, but then you don't have the actual source. I'll be specific. I'm doing something to do with water quality. Then my focus area is Zambia. Yeah, so yesterday on the news, they showed a story about a school where the water is salty and people affected. Some of them have developed high blood pressure, and they have intestinal problems. And then also the water pipes around the place are filled with the salty kind of chemical composition.
Precipitates.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a true story. They've been showed pictures and people are speaking from the school. So pupils are speaking. So how can I use it in my introduction? Because it is not documented as in some references.
Yes. So there are about 3 issues in that particular story. First, there is what we'd call anecdotal evidence. Okay? So you cannot say that because they are drinking that water, they have blood pressure. You have to prove that. So you cannot use that, the blood pressure thing, you cannot use it now until you have proved it. If you can actually get that water or a sample from the blood water and analyze it, or if there's someone who has analyzed that water, then that becomes now a fact. As long as it's just a story, you cannot use it. unfortunately, that's how science works. Yes. So you can say that people have said that they've got salt water there, but until someone has analyzed that water and come up with a chemical analysis that shows that that's the case, then comes what we call fact.
Must be documented.
Yes, or you should see some analysis of that particular sample from someone. So as far as it is now, it's just anecdotal evidence. Yes.
Can assumptions be taken? For example, if I say I'm researching hot air balloons, can I just state that hot air rises and continue, or do I have to provide a reference for that statement?
Okay, there are some things that are what we call accepted norms that everybody understands that, okay, drinking water is good for your health. Okay? Okay, so if you say hot air rises, you have to put it in a context. You should say, what temperature are you talking about? You only rise if there is a differential scale in temperature. There's no differential scale, it won't rise. To rise at a certain point and then it stops. Yeah. Okay. So an assumption is an assumption. It has to be proven.
By me or?
Yes, by you. Yes, by you. You have to prove it. You have to prove it. Okay. Okay, so this is where now this slide comes in. So before something becomes a scientific fact, okay, before something becomes a scientific, it can be an accepted fact in the community. Yeah. For example, we say our colleagues, the Herreros, they eat more meat than anyone else. But we have not really done the statistical data to really show that that's the case. Okay, so before something becomes a scientific fact, it needs to have some sort of established consensus. So that consensus is now where your scientific data comes in. Okay, so if you are setting something from your perspective or from your supervisor, okay, but it has not yet reached that consensus of being an accepted fact, then your writing should make it clear that that is a possibility. It's not yet a fact, but it's a possibility. Okay? So once it's a possibility, now you can now say, okay, if it's a possibility, then we can go further and see how it can become a fact. Possibilities then have probabilities. Okay? So because it's a possibility, then it has a probability. Okay? But that, again, is not good enough to establish the fact. And depending on your field, okay, so we rarely use the term in publications. We rarely use the term fact. Okay, even we know that it's a fact. We never write that this is the fact that Windu, the groundwater. We use other terms that point to the word fact. I hope you are following me. Okay. Okay, so because in science, by the time we come to the word fact, okay, how many of you believe in gravity, that when I drop this, it will fall down? Okay, but is that a fact? Okay, so from a scientific perspective, it is an accepted norm that still has to be investigated further. What makes it fall down? What is it that makes it? The actual fact of why it happens has not yet been completely interrogated. Of course, from Einstein's law of relativity, now we know that it is because anybody bends the space around it, and that's why it falls down. Okay, so when you write in your text, you don't try and use the word fact. Okay. Okay. And then you're not allowed to write your opinion. You should never say that my opinion in this fact is this. because you're writing science, you're writing to an audience. So you are writing to a group of people who would like to have a common understanding about a particular aspect. So they cannot be reading your opinion. Are you with me? Yes. Okay. Right. So it's one thing to say hair is delicious, and another thing to say, according to our data, 1 out of every 3 nurse and junior undergraduates drinks 1 or more liters of hair per week. So the first one, this is what can be used in the arts, in the social sciences. The second one is because now you have done some analysis, you have got data. So in science, we look at data. Yeah, we look at data. Right. And of course, because we look at data, who knows if we took 100, a sample of 100 people and we got these statistics, if we had taken 3,000, would it be the same statistics? We don't know. That's why we don't write the word fact. Okay. Interrogate the data and present the data. Okay. Okay, so when we are looking at possibilities, the words we use are like words like suggest. Okay, what I found suggests that this could be this. So we use the word suggest. So when you use the word suggest, one thing in science, we try and be humble. Even if you know for sure that this is the truth, but you try and be humble. It suggests this. It appears to be. The data seems to point to this idea. Okay? The data shows this. The graphs that have come up, they exhibit a characteristic of this particular shape or so forth. Or my data indicates that, or it points to, or it expresses this. Okay? And if you are very, very, very sure, you can use the word assert. Okay? And then you have gone very far. You're using the word assert. Okay. So this is very important because the person reading, remember that the person reading is actually trying to, is interrogating your statements, is interrogating your data. Okay. So as scientists, we may get a lot of data. And I've read a lot of theses, students who produce excellent data, but they are unable to interpret that data. I was reading a thesis, I think it was from CBU or somewhere there. This student had so much excellent data. And there was another one from University of Botswana. They had very good data. And then I wrote to her, I said, your student's got so much data. Can we write a paper about it? Because he has not used it. So collecting data is one thing. Interpreting the data is another thing. And that's where you separate the ladies from the girls and the girls from the gentlemen, using the data you have collected. That's when you can say, this student is on the ball. This is like the student who should be my postdoc tomorrow. Okay? So when you write and produce your data, think of ways how you can interpret that data. That's so important. I remember one time I was lecturing at the University of Zimbabwe, and one of the students produced a master's thesis, which was quite good. And I showed my colleagues, said, this student has got excellent data. Let's work on it. And this postdoc got that thesis and produced like 6 papers. Data interpretation. Just okay, this I'll write on one paper, on this I'll write on another paper, on this I'll write another, and that's data. So when you produce your data, don't rush to write. Think about your data. How can I present it? Various ways, and what can it tell me? You'll be surprised what your data can actually tell you. Okay. You can also make assertions based on possibilities. As I told you, when you make an assertion, that's like one of the highest levels of coming close to the word fact. Okay? We assert that. We assert that this particular aquifer has 6 compartments. Okay? Okay, so now we come to your question, fact or possibility. So anecdotal evidence suggests that cockroaches respond to electrical appliances or outlets. So that was a statement written by someone. But that thing had not yet been proven. There has been no work done to it. Okay? Or you can say cockroaches are likely to be difficult to escape if moisture is readily available in the household. Is that correct or is it wrong? No one has done work on that. But there's some housewives who say, at the end of the day, I make sure that everything is dry. The sink is dry. Everything is dry. And I don't have cockroaches. Okay, so maybe it works. Okay. Now, someone did a research and said that cockroach infestation was found in 45 households, and 558 cockroaches were actually collected. This guy was actually counting the cockroaches in a particular institution. He had 3 institutions where he was looking at the conditions of cockroaches that were infesting, and he made traps for them. Okay, and then he could talk something about the reality of the situation. Here's another one which I got this one from someone writing on COVID. It says, disgust and fear are basic emotions that protect humans against pathogens and predators. When COVID came, the first month, like when it came on this side, like January, everybody was scared. Right? And then after the first year of COVID, went into the second year of COVID, 2021, we are not so scared of COVID anymore. All right. And the interesting thing is that the first time COVID came, and somebody would test positive, even if they had no symptoms, they felt ill. But now, even if somebody tests positive, says, no, I'm fine. So fear is one of those things that actually influences how we behave. Yeah, I had a colleague when I was doing my master's in France. We were being tested for HIV, and he was tested back home, he was negative. He was tested in France the first time, he was positive, and he wanted to commit suicide because he was positive. We have to tell him, no, maybe the machine is wrong, just wait. Wait for another 2 weeks and test again. And then he tested the third time, he was negative. I said, look, he wanted to die. Okay. And then never make your readers work harder than they should. Okay, so don't imply important information. Okay, if the information is very important, don't make implications. Present real data. Okay, don't make implications. If the statement is really important, make sure you put your data. You say in figure so this graph shows this, and in table so we see this. Therefore, then push your data first, or you infer something. Okay. If you leave it to your readers to figure out what you're trying to do, you're going to lose them. The worst thing to happen to you is that in your introduction, the examiner finds, this spelling is wrong here. Is correct. You get this from? We check this reference. They check the reference and this guy is not saying this. This is wrong. If your introduction is already bad, when the examiner goes to your chapter 2, he's already biased against you. So make sure that your introduction is nice. That somebody is really pulls someone to read. someone gets into it. Yeah. So don't make it too hard for them. And one of the things you can do, you should write very clearly and try and be correct. Okay, so doesn't matter how good your results are, the way you write is very important. Okay, if your results are excellent, but you write very poorly, people will still fail you. Okay. Okay. And then in science, we try and leave flowery language. We don't write flowery language. We leave that to a poem. When you are in your free time, you can write to the Namibian and write how beautiful and magnificent the morning looked like. That morning when you woke up and saw the clouds had a silver lining with birds flying as if you are walking in a seashore. But in science, we try and write concisely and briefly to the point. Okay? And be careful when you write long sentences, because you may get yourself into a grammar issue. So if you like writing long sentences, be careful. Make sure that you read it, or better still, I'd say you cut your sentence so that your grammar is kept at least, it's preserved. So you should use proper grammar, spelling. Okay. What you write, depending how you write, it can reflect a negative or positive image. Even in your thesis, you should never write as if you are apologizing. I don't know whether you know what I'm telling you. You should never write as if what you're trying to write, you lean more on the negative side. For example, in the introduction that, oh, we did it in the dry season, but we had problems and this problem, this may could have led to the results not being blah, 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 blah. Don't write like that. Write like someone who is always trying to overcome the challenges that you found with a positive aspect. Okay. Right. So this is just to warn you, so be careful and be orderly with punctuation marks. One of the most important things that after we have written something, we rarely read it, right? Because of text messages and emails. You know, this email is urgent. You know, we rarely read our emails. We rarely read our text messages before we send them. So when you write something, always read it. Read it again. Read it yourself. See that flaws, and you have not missed anything, for example. Okay, common errors. Hyphens and hashes. Fusion between some of those words. Okay. Uses of apostrophes, abbreviations and acronyms. So, especially in water, we use a lot of abbreviations and acronyms. Now, when you're writing a thesis, you don't know who's going to mark your thesis. I had one student who wrote a thesis, and the examiner was in Texas in the US, the PhD. They don't know what SADC is. They don't know what how do we call this organization of it's not African Union. They don't know what African Union is. So if you write AU, they don't know what you're talking about. So even if you list your abbreviations in the introduction, it's always wise that in every chapter, first write, okay, the African Union vision, you put African Union AU, then you continue. You go in chapter 2, again, you write the Southern African Development Corporation, SADC. Yeah? So even if you have listed your abbreviations in your introduction, don't just go abbreviation throughout, because you don't know who's going to read your thesis. Okay. And we do that. We do exactly the same for questions. So we should try and use active voice. Of course, there are times when it's difficult, so we use passive voice. Yeah? In biology, for example. Yeah? And whenever you are writing one form, you should always choose the correct tense. Okay? And don't change tenses. Like in one paragraph, we have 2 tenses. No. keep to one tense for the whole paragraph. Okay, so if you're writing the present, write in the present. Writing in the past, say, for example, in the introduction, you say, okay, Namwater performed this. So you're writing in the past tense. So that whole paragraph must be past tense. Okay. Okay, so that is what I was just talking about. You should not switch them. Proofread for accuracy. Okay. All right, so next aspect is efficiency and precision. Scientific writing needs to be efficient, direct, and precise. So you may have to alter your writing habits. Okay, so you need to. It's actually a skill you pick as you go on. Sooner or later, you find yourself writing. Because you are reading scientific papers, you're writing assignments. Sooner or later, you find yourself writing scientifically. You get into the moment, so you don't have to worry so much about it. Come back. You should write to illuminate, not to impress. Use the simplest words, the simplest phrasing, consistent with that goal. But that doesn't mean that you should not be creative in writing. You can still use very good English with creative. Yeah. Okay. All right, so here's an example. If you read the first sentence, it says, it was found that the shell lengths of light snails tended to be larger for individuals collected closer. There is nothing grammatically wrong with that sentence. It is correct. But it's not concise. It's not concise. It's not a concise sentence. So you can write it better to say, snails found closer to the low tide mark typically had larger shells. So this is how we need to learn how to write, how to compress a sentence that was so long to read a shorter version, which is very correct. Here's another one. This was a student in the methodology chapter. In order to be able to examine and analyze our data, we utilize a number of computer software packages dedicated to conducting statistical evaluations. After he wrote it, he said, wow, now I'm using it. Okay, so you can rephrase this sentence to be shorter and even look nicer. Very easy. Yeah? It will occupy very little space. We use statistical software to analyze our data. Full stop. You have revised a very long sentence. Long sentence. Do that. So that is what you need to learn, how to be concise in scientific writing. Especially if you're writing a paper. The more concise you are, the more likely your paper is going to be accepted. Because if you're not concise, the reviewers will probably say, this could be written like this. This can be written like this. This could be written like this. If the reviewer is tired of correcting, you say, reject, not ready for publication. Yes.
So from my perspective, there may be page count issues, like you have this number of pages.
Yes.
That's why I write long things.
No. If the lecturer says we should write 10 pages, I think he's saying do not write more than 10 pages. But if he says 10 pages, you can be creative. You put some figures and pictures. And the text still remains consistent. There was a student, a geophysics student in Zimbabwe. He was an honors student. And this guy wrote a 25-page thesis. Only 25 pages. And after, I was not a supervisor, but after I read the thesis, I was an internal supervisor. After I read the thesis, I went and asked the dean, I said, look at this, read this and tell me what you think. And then the dean read it and said, ah, this looks like a master's thesis. I said, yes. I said, at the University of Zimbabwe, there's a rule that if the thesis is very good at honors level, it can be promoted to a master's. So that student graduated with 2 degrees, an honors degree and a master's degree. It was not a very long thesis. It was only 25 pages, but he wrote it so well. You know? And he got it. So writing can
See later on told to add more pages.
of course, no, he was not told to add more pages, but of course he was made to make a few corrections here and there. For example, I think he was asked to put an extra figure, which they had written something, but the examiners wanted them to put an extra figure. Because once the honors thesis is examined internally, but once the examiners internally found that it was a master thesis, it was the equivalent master thesis, they told him to say, look, we are upgrading you to a master thesis. Can you do these changes and we'll send your thesis for external examination? And he passed. So you should write well. We'll give you a professorship, not a PhD. Okay, so that so when I use colors like this, I don't just use them to look nice. Huh? I don't just use the colors for the text to look nice. So the colors mean something. So if I give you blue there, blue is the sky, right? You know the sky is blue. Whenever you look from the end to the end, it's blue. Okay? So when you look down here, you see the green trees. So when you see blue, it's something that is important. You cannot run away from it. So when you see my text written in blue, I tell my students, make sure it stays there. You should read what you've written. Make sure you read what you've written. Don't write something and give it to me when you have not read it yourself. Whatever you've written, read. Maybe read once, twice. Third time, then you can say, okay, now you can have it. Okay. So, no trees are green, eh? And we need trees to breathe. They produce carbon dioxide and oxygen. So they take our carbon dioxide and make food. And when they breathe, they give us oxygen. So they're very important. So in most cases, when you've written your work, you tend to know the sentences so well that you would never notice the typos and spelling mistakes. Maybe you read it even once, twice, because you are reading your thoughts. Okay? So you are reading your thoughts. Because you're reading your thoughts, you're going to read the sentence correctly. But the and is missing. But when you're reading, because it's your thought, you are reading it with and in it. But the and is missing in the sentence. What should you do? So when you've written something, especially when you're writing a paper or you're writing your thesis, after you've written this chapter 2, you read it, you leave it. Leave it for 2 weeks. Don't go to it. After 2 weeks, come back again and read that chapter. Then you are going to pick up some of the mistakes and errors. You always do that. Okay? So you need a 2 weeks break from the work, then come back and read. Then you pick up some of those errors. Very important. Don't forget that your brain, if I write a sentence which is broken English, you will still be able to read it and get the meaning. Yeah? So your brain, when you're reading whatever you've read, your brain is capturing the essence, the ethos, the most important thing. That's what your brain looks at. So it will not pick those simple mistakes and errors. So each time you read your own work, the first time I can assure you, even if you're a professor, I write my paper the first time, I just put it in my desk. I know when I read it the next time, there will be so, I should have added this, I should have added this, I should have added this. That's how the brain works. The brain doesn't care about small things, cares about important things. So when you write your work and you read it, you will not pick all the errors the first time because you're reading your own book. Okay. And then you will identify a lot of small errors. This applies for both thesis and publications. See that work, that color there is orange. Means be careful. Those small errors are red means stop. Okay. All right. So that was the first part. Any questions on that?
Someone is asking online, is
Yes.
it allowed to put figures under introduction?
Yes, you can. For example, the location of your area. You can put figures in introduction that speak to what you're trying to show the reader, because the introduction is just to put everything in context. Yeah. Okay. So in part 2, we're going to look at academic writing skills. I'll try and think this is not my. You should have done this somewhere along the way by now. The research onion. Okay, so in the research onion, before you start your research, you look at your research strategies. What are you going to do? How are you going to do your research? And then you look at the time horizons. How much time do you have to do this? How much time do you have to do that? Is that time enough? Is it not enough? And then you look at data collection. So that is the empirical type of research. So if you are doing a laboratory-based work, of course, data collection will be laboratory work. And then this other part, we look at the whole research. What is your work going to be all about? And what research philosophy is it? Are you going to use? Methodology, of course, will tell you what kind of research philosophy. Then you're going to look at your. So this is what we call the research onion. So basically, it's a picture. It's a mind picture of how where you are. For example, most of you now probably are still looking at your research strategies. This is where you are doing your research proposal, and doing the literature review, and then the time horizons are the ones that, if you're a sponsored student, you say, okay, I remember I told my supervisor, I said, look, I now should stop writing papers. I should write my thesis because I have only 1.5 years left. I said, okay, one more paper. So when I ended up writing 4 papers for my PhD, and then to write my thesis, I just summarized the papers into a thesis. But you need to be aware of time, especially if you are a sponsored student. I need to finish this. And then there are times when there may not be enough time to do everything you have decided to do in your objectives. And that's the time you can go back now to yourself and say, look, I think this objective, maybe we can drop it. Let's see if the thesis can still go ahead. You are allowed to do that. Okay. So reading is part of writing. Okay. Now, when you are reading and writing, you should not sit on your laptop and next to you is a paper. Yeah, suppose you're doing a literature review. You have the paper here, and then you are writing your literature review looking at the paper. No, don't do that. You should sit with your summarized work next to you, not the original work. Of course, it's very tempting to pick very nice phrases from the paper and put them in your work, because the paper will be very nice phrases there, very nice, very well constructed. And then, should I change this? Maybe I'll just change the and. Maybe instead of writing, however, I should write well. You know, don't get tempted to do that, because you're going to end up. So reading is very important. It helps us to determine how robust work is going to be. It also helps us to identify where existing research has left some gaps that we can fill. So if we haven't read, then we will not see those gaps. And it will also give us an idea of how other people have solved particular problems that may be the problem we are doing. And then when we are reading, we should also pay attention to how others have written about those things. So what you really need is sufficient evidence to back up your claims, arguments, and reasons, and you should become alert to your assumptions, because assumptions, just assumptions. Okay, so you need to be alert to your assumptions. Okay, so planning your writing. So you can see free writing is in blue. Everyone does does free writing in blue. But when we are doing free writing, we should always make notes and sketches. We should always have ideas. For example, you come to a seminar. Okay, you might want to pick 1 or 2 ideas that might help you. Okay, so ideas are always important. Okay, and then we can create a mind map. Then we can do a skeleton paper with subheadings. For example, where you are now, I would advise you for your thesis, you might change this. Try and have a skeleton, say chapter 1, introduction, or chapter 2, literature review. Okay, what do I have here? I have this. Will this answer, or have I read everybody has done on this topic? Maybe no. I should come back. Chapter 3, methodology. Chapter 4, results. What will I look at? I'll look at this and this and this and this. I have that already. Have that already. That frame should already be in your mind. Huh? Chapter 5, discussion. Okay. Maybe you are reading another paper on something, somebody wrote something about this. And, okay. Then you go and put it there in your discussion. Oh, so and so and so found this and this and this and this. Okay. So that is important. This is just an idea of a mind map. You don't have to use it, but if you are doing an online course, especially a scientific online course, you need to put pictures, videos. This is quite useful. Okay, I'll give this, then this text, then this figure will come here. Now, this part is quite important. How do you sustain your arguments when you are writing up your thesis? Okay, so read is very important. You have to prove that the thesis statement, controlling argument, has been answered. So that's where your objectives come in. You have to see that your objectives have been fulfilled. That's the first thing. When you're writing your thesis, you got your results. Now you come to your discussion. You must make sure that your objectives have been answered. So, when you're discussing results of your objectives. How objective 1 has been answered. Okay. Right. And then for each objective, you can signpost it. Okay. So by signposting, we are meaning you go to your results and say, this figure and that shows this and this and this. This objective, you don't have to say this objective. Maybe objective was to find out the water quality. Then you say, okay, the water quality in the area is as shown by these figures. And then you need to use words which signal transition. What that means that the chapters must be connected. They should not be disconnected. So your results chapter, when you're presenting your results, okay, it should be connected to your methodology. Okay, we found this is using this method as explained in the methodology chapter. And then you can put in brackets, reference, so and so and so used it in this year and found blah, 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 and so forth. And then there is the results chapter must also be connected to the discussion chapter. They should be connected. These two, results and discussion, some people put them in one chapter, but they should be connected. You should be always going back to your results. Okay, that is where you use now those transition words. However, nevertheless, that's therefore, despite this result being this, the other result showed this, which means that. And then you can now go to illustrating your theoretical positions. So the red ones are very important because they show that your thesis is connected, and they also show that you are actually the owner of your work. Because when you read a thesis which is disjointed, you start thinking, was the supervisor involved in this? This person, the way he writes here, the way he's putting, they don't seem to be joined. So those who have been read, the first one, objectives answered. The second one, referring to your data. The third one, joining your discussion and data. It shows that you own the work, so that you understand what you're doing. Okay. Then these other colors are not so important, but you need to illustrate examples using your figures. You need to analyze from a particular set of findings possible, and use subheadings. You should always use subheadings. Okay. And then in your discussion, you should also give counter arguments. You should say, in my research, I found this and this and this, but so and so and so found this and this. Probably the reason they found this and this is because of A, B, and C. You need to give counter argument. Okay, and always anticipate the next paragraph at the end of the next one so that they are all connected. So this, if you have missed everything in this talk, this you should get. Yes. If you miss everything, but this particular slide you should get. Yes, this is important. So when I'm marking a thesis, I look at this. Okay? Has the student answered their objectives? How did they collect their data? If they use their data, do they refer to their data? Do they know what their data means? Even if they collected the data, they could have been helped in the field data collection and so forth, but do they know what their data means? That is signposting your argument. Referring back to your data and writing something about your data. Okay. All right, so signposting and making transitions. So links between paragraphs, this is just to, this we learned at school, just revise you. Go through, we should always pick up the point from the end of the last paragraph to the next paragraph. So the paragraphs must be connected. In conjunctions, so especially when we are dealing with water, we deal with the temporal situations. We deal with causative situations. We deal with adversive situations. For example, the water is bad, it's going to cause, with a lot of sulfate, people might have diarrhea. So those are adversive situations. The additive. So these are things that we need to look at when we are actually writing and to bring these facts in. So if your thesis is about the water, surface water over the seasons, how is it affected by the rain season, dry season, so temporal, what are the causes, what are the adverse effects, what are the other things like pollution, that additive effects that come in. Okay, so this is not so important. So in most cases, we make lists in our theses. Okay, so when you make a list, we can say this alloy consists of copper, aluminum, iron. Okay, this alloy consists of 3 metals. You see the difference in the 2 sentences by just introducing another term, 3 metals. The alloy consists of copper, aluminum, and iron. There's nothing wrong with that phrase. But the next one has an impact. Someone reading is attracted. The alloy consists of 3 metals. What are they? They are copper, aluminum, and iron. We need to write like that. Okay, to sum up. If you are asked, what type of a writer are you? What are you writing practically? Can you answer that question? You know what type of writer you are? You need to answer that question. Okay, what are your approaches to reading? How do you read? How might you link your reading and writing? Okay. So free writing, what does that mean? It means that when you go to a seminar or you go to a talk, you collect ideas. So like when I give a professional talk, it's not that I'm giving it, everything I'm giving is my own is sometimes I get ideas from talk I heard the other side. I say, oh, so and so and so did this. And I'm bringing to you now to connect to this. You know, it makes something more interesting. Okay. Structures. So when you are doing your essay, if it's an assignment, you must have a structure. Your thesis, of course, will have a structure. A paper has a structure. Each journal has their own structure. They will tell you should write like this. You need to follow that structure. Okay. Right. So this I've already told you how to read the paper. So here is the paper we wrote. The idea of this work was on climate change. Okay? Our project was on climate change. But to do that project on climate change, we had to have a foundation. So we wrote 6 papers on this particular week. So this particular one was, first of all, to show the scientific community that the trees in Namibia have got rings. If they have rings, those rings can be used as markers for climate. So once that paper is accepted on rings, then we know now we can talk about climate. So now we can talk about climate. So this was the first paper we published. And what you do, you don't go for a cheap journal. Go for a top one that everyone reads. So if your paper is accepted in that top one, if it's rejected the top one, you say, okay, this one is rejected, and then you can try it. You know? That's how we should always do it. You go for a top one. Okay? So in this one, we established that the rings can be used to actually talk about climate. There are archives of climate. So that these rings in these trees in Namibia can be used to see how climate has changed over the last 200-300 years. So the next paper then referred to the work in this and showed, okay, climate change like this. Now we put temperature and precipitation. In the next paper, we put how climate is going to change in the next years. And the next paper, we put models. So that's how you need to do, even for your thesis, thinking like that, okay, if I do this data, now from this data, I should.
Like I'm looking.
Read the abstract and then read the conclusions and then look at the figures, the tables, look at the graphs, and then skim through the results. Then finally look at the introduction to give you the context. So, you know, this one was not a very long paper, it had only about 4 pages. So read the abstract, conclusions first, then read the introduction for the context, then read the first line of every paragraph. Look at the paragraph, see, I missed an at there, but I was reading, look at the paragraphs and tables. Huh? There's an A missing there. So if that does not give you what you're searching for, then go back, look at the results and discussion. This should give you a good picture of the publication. You don't have to read everything. This way you can read summarize 30, 40 pages. Text in a few hours, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, you're done. Then it's in your book. And you go to the next one, and go to the next one. And then you say, oh, this week I've done 36 papers. Okay. When reading manuscripts, make notes, use the highlighter, write a summary in your own words, write a critical response, take note of all the references. All the references, keep a note of the reference. That's very important. That's one of the things we look at to see whether you captured all the references in your. Finally, keep a record of all publications you have read. Okay. So this is very important. So even when you're doing a project, we keep in the file all the publications we've read. So we need, oh, that paper said this. Oh, there was that paper. You know, you need to do that. Okay.
Are you still presenting something else?
It's just one short one, the one for journals.
Can I have the keyboard?
Yeah. I hope you got something out of that. Yes.
So sometimes the paper is very good,
Yes.
but it's costly. Maybe they want 39 euros or something like that.
Oh. No, there are ways of circumventing that. Just talk to your prof or supervisor. You may be able to get it on his subscription if the university is not subscribed. Come do it. Yes. Yeah, and no, rules. Rules will come right in the research paper. Yeah. Open and listen to it.
Open on the wall.
Why not open and listen?
Should I open from?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay.
I have to share. I've not shared yet. Okay, it's not screen.
Okay, shared, shared.
I make it bigger than this.
Yeah, you can make it bigger. 120. Yeah, there on the plus sign there. This side, you know where the hand is? Hand? Yeah, that one, the plus sign, yeah. Click some.
But it will go.
Yeah, yeah, you can pull it this side.
Maximize.
Where it's coming from.
Just on the upper right,
Yeah.
that one, yes.
Aha. Now you can make it bigger some more. Yes, that's okay. Yeah. All right, I can.
Sorry.
So when I was sitting on the editorial board of this particular journal, this is the journal of physics and chemistry. Okay? What?
That was to connect with research.
And so?
Cancels.
What did you see? What had happened
It
here?
went to a different window, so you just need to.
Can you do
minimize the
control
window.
tab?
I can just, what about just
Minimize the window,
this one?
yes.
And just close.
Or close it.
I'll close it, ne?
Keyboard.
Okay, good. Now, right, so this, we decided that we needed to help our young people on how to write papers. So we asked gentlemen to come up with this. As a tutorial board, we went through it. So this just shows you how you write a paper. So the abstract, you should just look at this one. So I can give you this. I'll give you this paper. I'll send it to Katrina. You can have it. Abstract should just be short and give the overall idea, what was done, what was found, and what are the main conclusions. So the abstract should have, yeah, so RA means research article. So, okay, and then you have to select your keywords. Huh? So your keywords are very important. You know why? Because that's where you can, when people are searching for something, that's where your keywords come in. So if you put something which is catchy, then your research will come up when people are searching. Okay. Right. Topic and emphasize why it is important. So that's very important. The first paragraph of your introduction should actually state why it is important, why that paper you're writing is important. Okay. And then the second thing, you need to connect current knowledge to your work. Okay? To say, so and so has done this, but never did this. So and so did this and this, but never did that. So and so did this, so that somebody reading can say, okay, so this guy is going to write on these gaps. You get that? So the introduction should set that stage. Now say, because of this and this and this still needs to be done. So you need to read that. And then after you've said that this still needs to be done, then you come to say why and how you're going to do it. So you introduce your work, with the purpose and the main objective. So your introduction is done. Okay. So your introduction basically is very important. Just to go through it again. So you introduce the topic and then explain why it's important. All right. So why it is important. Okay. And in that particular part of why it's important, it's always important to write things like this work has never been done. For example, that paper I showed you from Dendrochronologia, one of the things we said that this has never been done in Southern Africa. And people don't use in Southern Africa because they think that we do not have trees that form regular rings. So once you put something that means that that work is new, people will have difficulty in trying to reject your work. Oh. When you are now giving your work and the objective, you should be generous with yourself. You should say that this work is going to cover this and this and this. And then you come to your methodology. So the methodology must describe your experimental setup. What is it that you did? How did you do your experiment to get your result? And then you explain the techniques you used. Okay, for example, what statistical software you use. If in climate change we use like man-Kendall models and stuff like that. You need to put in there and then say how that technique differs from other techniques that are already being used in that same particular area. For example, when you look at issues of recharge, for example, we say that we use this method other than this method because we're in an arid area, or we use this method other than that method because we're in an area which is wet, and so forth. And so the research article is like a recipe. So when you're writing an article, it's like you're following a cooking recipe. So cut your tomatoes, you cut your onions, but because the tomatoes are going to ripen, are going to be ready earlier than the onions, you fry your onions first. When the onions are ready, you throw in your tomatoes, and then you put in your baked beans and eggs or something like that for breakfast. So the first paragraph in a research article is to give a summary of your results. Can you give a summary of your results? And then after you've given a summary of your results, then you compare your results. Then that means now you start discussing your results. So you compare your results to say, okay, in this area, what we found was this. The first thing you write, for example, okay, I worked in Omaheke, Zojupa, Punene, and Commerce. In Commerce, I found this and this and this and this. And then you say, Commerce compared to what was Zojupa, it was this. And then they compare to this and this. Then you need to come and put more focus on what you want to communicate to the general public. So that focus is very important. So here just a list of things that may lead to your publication being accepted or rejected. Topic, if the topic is irrelevant or not of very, it may be a very nice paper, but maybe it's only for local interest. So if you write something about window, for example, you want to write groundwater, uh, groundwater management for the aquifer. That's not a good title. Not a good title. You need to write something that has a wide application. You can say groundwater management, arid cities. An example of arid cities. How should we manage aquifers in arid cities? Then you write an example of window. Now that's a good title. So that's very important. Then newness, papers offering nothing new. So you should do, for example, if you are writing groundwater management in aquifers, example, Windhoek, you can say Windhoek is one of the 3 cities in the world that recycles water because of its aridity. So that's something unique. And you can even say that this uniqueness means that we need to be more careful how we manage resources in such arid areas. Then you say Mexico, blah, 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 blah. Chile, blah, 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 blah. Nevada, blah, blah, blah. California, blah, blah, blah. Then you come to Windhoek. So you give a global picture. And that way, someone in California reading say, what are the guys in Windhoek doing? What are the guys in Chile doing? You see? So that is very important. So then your objectives must be clear, the conclusions, the objectives and conclusions must be connected. This is what I was saying. Like whenever you write something, it should follow. It should be signposting, going back to what is there. Or everything you put in the paper must be following one another. Okay. For example, the title is very important. The main factor in the title is really get content, main discovery. It should attract the reader's attention. No? Oh, for example, I write to say flow dynamics of the Zambezi River. How good is that? It's not a good title. Huh? It's not a good title. Or for example, our Quisep River here is one of the steepest ephemeral rivers in the world. So I like flow dynamics of the Quisep River. It's not a good title. But if I write a unique occurrence of an ephemeral steep river system and ecosystem, implications for other rivers of its kind in arid area. Okay, this is something different. So the title must always be something that it should be short and simple. This is what I was saying, that the title must be short and simple. It shouldn't be too long. Okay? And it should make it catchy. And then the abstract, of course, must reflect the main story. Okay? If you use past tense, use past perfect tense and passive voice. Okay? You should have short and concise sentences. This is what I was telling you. And then we should avoid introducing the text in the abstract. Don't just give the results, the conclusion. And the introduction is where you now have the latitude to introduce your topic, define your terminology, relate to existing research, indicate the focus of the paper and the research objectives. Again, the style should be simple. It should also be more interesting because in the introduction you want to tell people what others have done. Someone did this, someone did, but they did not do this. Someone did this and did this, they found this, but they did not do this. So that the gap where you are coming in is very clear. So the methodology also must provide enough detail. What was done, who has done it, when it was done, when it was done, how it was done, and why it was done. So here, in the methodology, you can use both past tense or you can use active voice. But the important thing in methodology is that you should mention everything you did that can make difference in the results. Yeah. For example, a student was presenting a water quality study they did in the coastland. Okay, and then the student said, well, before they analyze their samples and put their samples in the bottles, they washed the bottles with methylated spirit. Then one of the examiners asked the student, why did you use methylated spirit? The student's answer said, but I saw it was a method used by other people. Yes, but why? Why did you use it? So someone put something they read in literature, but they did not understand why they had to use it. So we need to understand those things. You should say, okay, we normally use that if we are in a very humid area, okay, where pathogens can actually grow for water quality studies. So we can use methylated spirit if we know that we're in a very humid area and things like that can happen. So, okay, so the other thing we need to look at is we need to do a flowchart. You can do this even for your thesis. You can do a simple flowchart. Introduction, I'll put this, I'll put that, I'll put that. Methodology, I'll put that, I'll put that, I'll put results, I'll do that and so forth. Then you can now do abstract, I write it last. After I've written everything, now you abstract, you write it last. That's the last thing you write. Okay. Such questions and you give a summary to your conclusions. So basically the conclusions, what you need in the conclusions is to, this is a take-home message for the reader. So they've read your paper. What is it that they should know? If there's anything else, suppose they don't have enough time to read your paper, they're going to read your abstract and your comment. So what are you going to tell them? This is their take-home message. So maybe you found a new technique on how to do something. You put it there. So this is the first time this has been done. It's found that it actually functions. Okay, I'm done. Thank you very much. And preferences, normally this is in the discussion. Please, you should acknowledge everyone. Write all the references. You should acknowledge everyone who has helped you. Even that guy who was getting water from the bore for you using a baler. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Two questions. So the first one is based on what you said, that you state that this has never been done for been done.
Yeah, there's actually another piece. So,
Second one is in the reaction, get what's done and also done. For example, when you're doing the introduction for review, so you have to what other literature review papers are.
No. The literature review, literature review is done for your work, what you're doing. Okay, so you look at papers who have done similar work, see the aspects in your area which they have not done. There are so many things that have not been done. You cannot list them all. So you need to focus on your work. So let's say, for example, you are looking at
Artificial intelligence.
okay, artificial intelligence for water quality. So quality, water, surface water,
Surface water.
surface.
Yes.
Okay. So now you look at people who have used artificial intelligence and see if they've done it in the and how they've done it. Okay.
We have some few questions online as well. This one is, when do we say the paper is current? 5 years old or 10 years?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So normally 5 years is acceptable, but there are some papers that they may be very old. They are still current. For example, the Man Candle, 1946 paper. Okay, there's another one by Kozinski, 1962. And there was another one on isotope in 1972. And then another one on Chinese. What else? That was 1998. So there are some papers. So basically what we look at, when we're looking at a paper, we are saying that at least 80% to 85% of the literature must be current. That shows that you are in touch with what is happening now. That does not exclude you to put certain literature from a long time ago. But we should not see that you are using literature from the 70s. No, it occupies like 50% or 60% of your answers. No, that's it. I want you to know what everybody's doing now. That's why when you're writing a PhD, for example, you finish now, okay, you submit your PhD. Then you get your comments, say 3 months later. Then you take like 6 months to address those comments. You will say, okay, you have taken longer time. Now, can you update all your references to the current ones? That's why that rule is. So you need to address all your comments within the.
The other question is, what are the key things the reviewers look for in the paper?
Well, the first thing the reviewers look for in a paper is, there's something new. Are you communicating some new information? If it's not new information, they look at how does the paper flow? There a flow in the paper. Okay? If the paper flows, it connects next section to next, then that's okay. Of course, if it's not well written, it will be retained. If it's really, really badly written, it will be rejected. And then they also look for evidence. How do you sustain your argument? Do you have enough data? We say that if you don't have data, the structure collapses. Data is like foundation. So if there's enough data to sustain your arguments, we look a lot at originality as well. If someone has written exactly the same type of paper, then we'll reject it.
Someone is asking also, what tips can you share regarding writing of review papers?
Okay, so review papers are quite good. I've just written a review paper which was accepted this morning. The reason why I like review papers is that we get a lot of citation. Very good for citation. So once you write a review paper, the biggest thing with the review paper is for you to give yourself enough time to read a lot of literature, what others have done. Okay, and bring that information together and put it in a way that is not too long, but enough, just like a skirt. Skirt must not be too long, be no interest. Must not be too short, then you expose everything. Just be right, okay? Should sustain the interest. Should sustain the, so that's the review paper. You should not make it too long. Don't, okay? So, and then the other thing about the review paper is that you ensure that you identify critical information in that particular area, which must be contained in your review, so that it becomes a place to go to. Place to go. Place to go. Yes.
Someone was saying before Dr. closes, kindly touch on the difference between aims and objectives.
Okay, right. So, an aim, like an overall picture of your study. Okay? But an objective, there'll be several objectives. You have one, for example, I've got a project on climate change. So our aim is to try and assess how climate is going to change Russia and then a region in 50 years. So that's the aim. The aim is to assess how climate is going to change in Etosha National Park, then a region in the next 50 years, because then a region is one of the highest and poorest areas for climate changes to affect livelihoods. Now the objectives come. Okay? Objective one, how are we going to do this? What do we want to, how do we want to sustain this aim? First one is to collect rainfall data, collect socioeconomic data, the livelihoods will be affected. Then to collect tree data to see how climate has changed in the past. Were there big bumps or straight? So those are objectives. These objectives are going to be used to answer that.
So someone is also asking, can a good doctor highlight on gap identification in research?
So that is very important, actually, gap identification in research. That's the whole reason why we want you to do a literature review. Sometimes when you are doing literature review, you don't find, you find that everybody has done this. It's already been done, it's already been done. So what can I do? So gap identification is actually the first thing you need to do for your particular topic, and it should help you to structure your topic. So if you have chosen a particular topic and then you do a literature review, you find a lot has been done, then you can just twist your topic a little bit, do something different. Especially after you've read, you can now see what areas have not been touched. So gap identification basically is like a PhD. That is the most important, because you need to do research in an area which is pristine. You need to do research in an area which is pristine. Or you need to do or develop a technique which has not been developed. So that's another thing you can do. You can develop a technique which has not been developed. Yes.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Speak a bit louder. The ones online cannot hear you.
Oh, thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. My question focuses on the literature review. Is there space for reviewing policy documents, say for specific local government or for specific country when you're reviewing literature? Or it only has to be reviewing academic written documents?
Very good question. And I didn't cover that aspect. So government documents like policies and constitutions and strategies and policies and laws, those are considered as official documents. Yes, and because they're official documents of the state, those can be reviewed. They are accepted. Yeah. So there is space for that.
Some hands online.
From hands up, I can't see, I can only see what is written, so. Check there. So check who is online.
And Anna.
Then Anna, can you ask your question? Your hand is up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And thank you for the insightful and eye-opening presentation. My question is actually concerning the article publishing. In terms of how would an author deal with the citation soliciting from the maybe the journal editor, and as an author, are you obliged to comply, or do you have an option to refuse citing the editor's publication in your journal?
Oh, okay. Okay. The question is very clear. So the editor is not going to impose herself or himself article. If it's your choice to cite his works, you can do that. If it's not your choice, you don't have to do it. Okay. So the important thing is just that all the citations you give in your work are relevant to the work you've done. Unless if that particular aspect that the editor is commenting on, for example, if your paper comes for review and they tell you that this particular work needs to be cited for your work, in that particular case, then you have to oblige because it might be kind of a piece of work. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. I'm actually in such a situation because so the editor is kind of recommending that I cite 4 of his publications, and I strongly feel that you know, one, yes, I do understand that I should cite because it really adds value. But the others, I feel like it is a kind of maybe citation hunting, sort of.
Okay, yeah, so there you've answered the question already. So you know that as an author, you have that freedom to say, you can say that, okay, these other publications, I don't see how they add value, but this other one I'm going to cite it. So you as an author, you have that freedom.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other hand?
Yes, there was another one. Abner Hong. Abner Hong. You may go ahead, Abner Hong.
Yes. Okay, it's Abinang Ongoroka. Thank you, Prof. Mapane, for the insight presentation. I would like to ask just a question concerning the thesis and the objectives. Let's say my thesis and the results came out not really answering my objectives, but it's probably because the scenario that I'm treating is might be a trial. It has not been done before, hence the methods could not be established. So that's like very experimental, and maybe the system that I'm dealing with is very unique, such that the method that were used were based on the literature of analog, but it's not really the case that it is an analog. Maybe that system become more unique than what has been anticipated. So in that case, but as a student, I have written everything and they have come to realize that I did not answer the objectives because the method did not work. How do you treat such particular student thesis, would it be an automatic fail? Or if not so, in that regard, marking that thesis, would you now treat the thesis on merit of what the student have written, or just an idea? How would you handle that, Prof? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Abner. Yeah, so that to me would show that probably you are not communicating with your supervisor, because along the way, before finishing your thesis, you could see that you are not meeting your objectives. In which case, you should have changed some of the objectives to be in line to what your methodology is giving you. So if you say that you're going to Rehoboth and you end up in Okahanja, I'm sure you know that Okahanja is not Rehoboth. So if your thesis has not met the said objectives, it will be failed. If you are fortunate, it will be a rewrite. You need to, as you go along with your thesis, you need to be looking at your objectives and see if you are meeting them. If you're not meeting them, maybe you should change them and tweak them a little bit to they should rhyme with your work.
Thank you, Prof.
Right.
Any other? Nothing? Okay. So I think we have come to the end of our seminar today. It's 10:58.
Oh, thank you.
Said 2 hours was too much. And I can see you took all your time. Thank you very much, Professor Mapani, I'm sure you guys, you are going out different from the way you came in this morning. We expect to see good results. Your write-ups must improve after this. So thank you very much for those online who have joined us. I think I saw more than 70 participants online. More than 70. So we really appreciate your support in the program. This afternoon, we have another seminar. So those who are interested can join us in the afternoon. So the seminar is going to be on science communication, and it's going to be delivered by Ms. Huda Brandt. Basically, what it is all about is about you communicating your science to the layman. How do you use probably social media to communicate your science? I think all of us here normally use Facebook for our own, stuff, but how do you use the platform, different platforms to communicate your science? So this is going to be what we have in the afternoon. So please join us 2 to 4. Yeah. So for those who want the presentation, I'll get it from Professor Mapani, and then I'll share. Just put your email address on Teams so that I can get everything online. And then we are also in the process of developing a YouTube. It's under construction, YouTube channel. So we are going to put all the seminars recordings that we have been undertaking since we started. So for those who might have not gotten time to attend our seminars, they can then go on YouTube and view them. So I think this ends our seminar. Thank you very much. See you in the afternoon, 2 to 4.
Also want to copy of.
Hi, because I'm the new